They said justice was blind, but that day, I realized it was deaf too. The judge's voice echoed through the courtroom like thunder. Maya Carter, you are hereby sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. I didn't cry. I just stared at the two faces that once defined my world. Vanessa Reed, my best friend, and Ethan Cole, the man I loved. They couldn't even look me in the eye. Every piece of evidence pointed at me, millions stolen from the tech firm I helped build. But the truth? They framed me. When the guards cuffed my hands, I whispered to myself, this isn't the end. It's just the beginning. A year ago, my life was golden. I was co-founder of BentaShield Technologies, a cybersecurity startup designed to protect corporations from data breaches. Vanessa was my best friend since college, smart, fierce, and my closest confidant. Ethan was our lead engineer and the man I planned to marry. We worked day and night in that tiny New York office, building dreams. We laughed, celebrated milestones, and promised to stay loyal no matter what success brought. But behind those smiles, they were plotting. I was too busy trusting to see the knife they were sharpening behind my back. It started with small things, missing files, strange code edits, fake logins. I thought it was a hacker. I never imagined it was Vanessa and Ethan. Then came the audit. Millions had been transferred using my credentials. Vanessa cried in front of the board, pretending to be heartbroken. Ethan played the victim, the loyal fiancé betrayed by the woman he loved. I begged them to believe me, but the evidence was perfect, too perfect. When they testified against me, my heart shattered into silence. I wasn't just losing my freedom, I was watching my life get buried alive. Prison wasn't the worst part, betrayal was. I replayed every laugh, every secret we shared, and every late-night coding session. Vanessa had promised we'd change the world together. Ethan had promised forever. They took everything, my company, my love, my name. But pain has a strange way of teaching patience. Behind bars, I learned to listen more, talk less, and think smarter. I studied cybersecurity, business law, and digital forensics. If they could frame me with code, I would destroy them with it. 3 years later, I stood outside the prison gates, free, but not the same woman who walked in. The city lights felt different now. Colder. I had one suitcase, a clean record under parole, and a mind sharper than ever. The world thought Maya Carter was broken. But I had evolved. I changed my name, changed my face, and vanished into the shadows of Manhattan's tech world. While Vanessa and Ethan lived large off my stolen dream, I began building something new, something designed not just to protect systems, but to expose traitors. They set me up, I whispered, staring at their company's billboard in Times Square. But this time, I'll set the trap better. Freedom tasted strange, like a meal left too long on the fire. For weeks, I stayed hidden in a cheap apartment in Brooklyn. I had nothing but a laptop, a new name, and a purpose sharper than pain. I became Elena Ross, an independent cybersecurity consultant. No one questioned the forged identity. In the tech world, results speak louder than pasts. At night, I tracked BentaShield Technologies, my company. They had turned it into a billion-dollar empire. My logo still glowed on every screen, but my name was erased from history. I smiled bitterly. Erase me all you want, I whispered. But you can't delete the ghost in your system. Revenge requires patience and perfection. I rebuilt myself from the ground up. A new wardrobe, new accent, even a different hairstyle. I networked quietly, taking on small cybersecurity jobs, earning credibility, and planting whispers of my expertise across the city. Every client, every project was a calculated step closer to BentaShield. Soon, whispers turned to attention. I was invited to tech expos, startup events, and closed-circle conferences, the same ones Vanessa and Ethan now headlined. Watching them from a distance, smiling and shaking hands like innocent stars, I felt a familiar fire rise. The mask of Elena Ross wasn't just a disguise. It was my armor. Fate didn't bring us back together.
I did.
After months of digital maneuvering, I created a dummy firm called Nova Secure, offering advanced breach detection, something Bentashield desperately needed after a string of mysterious cyberattacks I orchestrated. Within weeks, they reached out for a partnership. Vanessa's assistant scheduled a meeting. When I walked into that glass conference room in Midtown Manhattan, my heart thudded, but my face was calm. Vanessa looked at me, but didn't recognize me. "Miss Ross," she said, shaking my hand. "We've heard impressive things about your work." I smiled. "Oh, I've heard a lot about yours too." Working with Bentashield was like walking through the ruins of my own life. Every system, every code pattern carried my fingerprints, my creation, now owned by thieves. I played my part well, polite, professional, efficient. But behind every audit report I sent, I embedded a seed, invisible digital trackers that would later bloom into evidence. Each night, I revisited their systems from the shadows, finding hidden files, offshore accounts, and encrypted ledgers. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. They hadn't just stolen from me, they had stolen from investors, too. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was justice disguised as code. One evening, after another productive meeting with Vanessa and Ethan, I caught my reflection in the office glass. For a moment, I didn't recognize myself. The woman who once begged for mercy in court was gone. In her place stood a strategist, cloaked in calm and intelligence. Ethan looked at me curiously that night, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Have we met before?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "No," I said, holding his gaze. "But you will remember me soon." As I walked away, my plan solidified. I had infiltrated their empire. Now it was time to pull the first string. They think they hired a consultant, I thought. But what they really hired is karma. They taught me to read code like other people read love letters. Every line a confession. I sat in Bentashield's glass-walled lab after hours, the city a pool of lights beyond the monitors. I'd planted the trackers as innocuous modules in the diagnostic updates I recommended. By day I was Elena, collaborative, helpful, indispensable. By night, I was the ghost reading their secrets. The trackers were elegant cruelty, tiny, patient scripts that traced data flows, recorded file transfers, and whispered back account numbers hidden inside innocuous metadata. I watched funds move through shells and shadow wallets at 2 a.m, watched spreadsheets morph into alibis. Vanessa had a talent for plausible tears. Ethan had a talent for plausible numbers. Together they'd made an art of lying. I did not need to destroy them. I needed them to self-destruct, to trip on the very breadcrumbs they loved to leave. That night, I found an encrypted ledger tucked in a private directory labeled with the old Bentashield codename, Aegis. My breath hitched when I matched one of the entries to a wire transfer to a Cayman account. Someone else's hands had to pry that open. I smiled and set the next stage in motion. Outside, a cab horn cried like an answer. Inside, a file decrypted. Someone was about to lose sleep. Every good trap has a distraction. For 2 weeks, I fed the rumor mill. I emailed false vulnerability reports to lower-level analysts. I arranged for faux panic messages that sent their incident response team chasing ghosts. While they sprinted toward shadows, I had the luxury of time. Time to map connections, cross-reference emails, and stitch a narrative that would look inevitable to any auditor. The company rallied, Vanessa's voice steady in press calls, Ethan's laugh loud in investor meetings. Publicly, they were unshakable. Privately, they misstepped, furious at the phantom I'd engineered. They issued memos, froze accounts, blamed contractors. Perfect. Panic breeds mistakes. I baited a meeting with a mid-tier partner and accidentally leaked a fragment of the ledger, an old invoice, stamped with a code that matched a payment I'd seen routed offshore. The partner called. He had questions. Questions breed records. Records breed subpoenas. That night I sat on the rooftop of a bar, Manhattan breathing beneath me, and watched the company's stock dip, a sliver, barely noticeable to the public, seismic to insiders. In the lab, a backup script failed at precisely 2:13 a.m., and I watched as their system pinged an unfamiliar IP, my IP, masked and distant. Already, someone inside had noticed. The game was no longer only mine. It was theirs too. Vanessa knew how to perform grief and rage in perfect measure. I'd seen the actress at work in court. Now I saw the director off stage. She convened a private council in the penthouse boardroom, closing the curtains like a ritual. The room smelled of coffee and fear. Ethan paced with the brittle energy of a man who'd learned to control everything except the truth. They didn't suspect me because they didn't recognize the anger in me as the same instrument they'd once wielded. I sat at the table, gentle, offering analysis that soothed and redirected. My notes suggested internal sabotage, a disgruntled contractor. I nodded when they nodded, and when Vanessa's eyes skimmed my face, she cataloged me as an asset, not an enemy. She showed me her vulnerability report. She felt safe sharing it with me. Dangerous complacency. In the middle of the meeting, my phone buzzed. An anonymous tip sent to one of their compliance officers, pointing to a shell company tied to the ledger code. I watched Vanessa's jaw clench. She reached to call legal, and her hand trembled. Not with guilt, but with the first true fear I'd seen in her since the trial. She dialed, voice low, and asked for an emergency audit. I folded my hands like a woman who gives comfort. Inside, my heart beat like a metronome counting down to when the trap would snap. The audit opened doors I'd left ajar. Investigators combed logs and invoices and found more than anomalies. They found pattern. The pattern led not to a lone contractor, but to accounts controlled by two people who had used my old credentials to authorize transfers. Evidence is a stubborn animal. When it smells blood, it doesn't let go. Vanessa and Ethan scrambled, erasing traces and planting decoys. Their moves were clumsy. Desperation is a lousy strategist. I watched as Ethan tried to reroute a wire through a partner that, conveniently, had just sent the anonymous tip that morning. Coincidence was a story they told themselves to sleep. I let them sleep. Let them dream. One evening, a junior analyst, the kind who kept late nights and too much caffeine, approached me with a printout. "Look at this," he said, shaking. The printout matched an email chain I'd seen months earlier, an internal order signed by Vanessa's executive key. The analyst's eyes widened. "Do you think?" he asked. I closed my hand over the paper and felt the fibers. The analyst wanted heroes. I wanted justice. I smiled and said, "We follow the wire." He nodded, and the die was cast. The wire would lead where I wanted. But someone else was listening in on our conversation. Someone had recorded us. The trap was starting to sing. The first arrests aren't always dramatic. They are bureaucratic, subpoenas, sealed warrants, a bailiff's quiet knock. But the noise that followed was deafening. An investigator called a press embargo, but whispers leaked. Investors called their brokers. Employees whispered in Slack channels. The board convened emergency sessions. They came for Vanessa's assistant first, a convenient fall guy with access and debts. She cried under the glare, naming names to save herself. The assistant said the transfers were signed off by an executive key tied to Vanessa's credentials. Vanessa swore it was hacked. Ethan's face tightened. He blamed technicians. I watched them from a hallway, every inch of my body humming with a cold, sweet satisfaction. But the world is messy. The press got hold of partial records. Headlines hinted at scandal, but didn't reach the truth. Vanessa and Ethan hired expensive PR and lawyers to spin narratives and bury the story. The company's stock shook, but refused to break. As I walked past the atrium, a maintenance worker tipped his cap, a small human not in the machine. In his hand he held a USB, dropped in a stairwell, recently found. On it, a backup of Aegis, my original repo. The maintenance worker didn't know the name. He didn't need to. I slipped the USB into my pocket, fingers steady. Somebody else had been playing with matches too. The trap had snapped once, but the final fall was coming, and it would be beautiful. The headlines began as whispers. Ventus-Shield faces internal audit after data leak. Vanessa smiled on television, denying everything with the poise of a saint. Ethan flanked her like a loyal husband, his arm resting on the back of her chair, eyes darting like trapped code. But behind those cameras, their empire was cracking. Clients began calling off contracts. Employees started resigning quietly, afraid to be next. Investors demanded explanations that sounded less like excuses and more like numbers. I watched it unfold from my apartment window, laptop open, city lights flickering across my face. The same digital walls that once confined me were now collapsing on them. "You taught me how to frame innocence," I whispered. "Now watch how I frame guilt." Ethan had always been brilliant, but brilliance without integrity is self-destruction on a timer. I began sending him anonymous emails, screenshots, decrypted ledgers, and threats disguised as warnings. Each one seeded paranoia. He started doubting Vanessa, questioning every meeting she had, every signature she made. I could see it in his eyes during our consulting sessions, suspicion eating him alive. He installed secret trackers on her laptop, trying to protect himself. I, in turn, watched his every keystroke. Trust was their foundation. I made sure it became their weapon. That night, Ethan stayed in the office till dawn, alone, sweating over his monitor. I watched through remote access as he tried to delete the wrong folder, my planted evidence labeled "Do Not Open." He opened it. And just like that, I had his fingerprints on a file that tied him directly to embezzlement. The next morning, the tension between them was visible even through the glass walls. Vanessa stormed into the boardroom, slamming a stack of papers down. "You're setting me up," she shouted at Ethan. He shot back, "You think I don't know you've been covering your tracks since the audit?" The board members stared, horrified, as the perfect couple's facade shattered on live video. The footage conveniently leaked hours later to a tech journalist. By evening, Bentashield's stock plummeted 20%. I sat in the back of a cafe, stirring my coffee slowly as my phone buzzed with notifications. Every news outlet was replaying their argument, word for word. And for the first time in 3 years, I laughed, not out of joy but release. Betrayal, I thought, is poetic when it circles home. Now, they were being hunted by their own reflection. Ethan barely slept. Vanessa stopped showing up at the office. Their investors demanded an independent investigation. I fed that investigation, carefully, through encrypted leaks, the same evidence they once fabricated against me, now rebuilt with truth. Late one night, I left an envelope at Vanessa's penthouse door. Inside was a photograph from our college graduation. The three of us smiling, naive, unstoppable, and a note written in her handwriting. "Every system has a backdoor. You just never knew who built yours." By morning, she was calling Ethan in tears, demanding to know who had been inside their home. He denied everything, of course. But deep down, they both knew, ghosts don't knock. The final stage was set. I only needed one last push. A security breach, one so public, so undeniable, that even their lawyers couldn't spin it. I uploaded a segment of their hidden financial data onto the company's own public site for 10 minutes, long enough for journalists and regulators to capture screenshots.
The internet did the rest.
Within 24 hours, the SEC launched a full-scale probe. The FBI followed. Vanessa and Ethan's empire didn't collapse with an explosion. It imploded silently, one scandal at a time. And as the world pointed fingers, I walked past their headquarters for the last time, hood up, rain tapping on glass. "They framed a ghost," I whispered. "Now the ghost has returned, and justice is coming." The morning broke with sirens. By 9:42 a.m., federal agents in dark suits swarmed Bentashield's glass tower. I watched from a nearby cafe, coffee untouched, as chaos unfolded through the window reflection. Vanessa was let out first, impeccable as ever, even in handcuffs. Ethan followed, pale, trembling, cuffed between two agents. Cameras flashed like gunfire. Their employees filmed in shock, the internet caught fire, and every news ticker screamed. Founders of Bentashield arrested for fraud and corporate espionage. In the chaos, no one noticed the anonymous digital packet sent to regulators, the full audit trail, neatly compiled and time-stamped. My final signature was encrypted into the metadata, authored by M. Carter. Not for revenge. For record. They took my name from the company, I whispered, but not from history. 2 days later, I visited the courthouse. From a distance, I watched Vanessa in her prison jumpsuit, wrists chained, eyes hollow. There were no tears this time, just understanding. When she spotted me in the corridor, her breath caught. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Her lips parted, trembling. Maya? I tilted my head slightly, a small, almost pitying smile. You remember, I said softly. Her knees gave out. It wasn't triumph I felt, it was release. The weight of years lifted like morning fog. Justice didn't roar. It exhaled. The board of Bentashield released an official statement. It has come to our attention that the company's original patent and intellectual property rightfully belong to Maya Carter. For days, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Lawyers, journalists, and investors all scrambling to meet the mysterious whistleblower behind the case. I returned to the glass office that once bore my name, now cleaned out, silent, waiting. A new plaque shimmered on the door. Maya Carter, founder and CEO. I stood in the doorway, heart steady, voice low. You can rebuild an empire from ashes, I murmured. You just have to light the right fire.